I'm sure you covered this, but thoughts on Devastation changes? Yeah, I'll give you like the 50-second roundup. This is going to be way longer than 50 seconds. There's two sides to it, right? Like on one side, I want to emphasize how big of a code red this is. And on the other side, I also want to inform you that this is also a process, and what we were looking at is an unfinished product. Hey everyone, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. So today we're going to be talking about Devastation Evoker in 10.1. Blizzard has a lot of changes in store for us, and we're just going to cover what those changes are first, and then I'll give you my take on how I feel about this stuff. So to start things off, let's just give the cliff notes, right? So Blizzard basically says in this developer note that they don't like that we're doing disintegrate clipping to get Dragon Rage extensions, and they want to address that because they feel it is unintuitive. And they also want to address our AoE damage to make the gameplay a little bit more varied, right? So they're changing Imminent Destruction, and they're also adding new talent, Raging Inferno. So basically there's two halves of the changes, right? The first half is all specific to Disintegrate and Single Target, and the second half is going to be about AoE. So these bullet points right here, it's kind of a mixed bag, but Feed the Flames has been completely redesigned. It no longer affects anything to do with Disintegrate. It has to do just with Pyre. Pyre is the only spell that affects Feed the Flames now, and it basically works the same way as it did before, except for Fire Breath and Eternity Surge are both reduced, and the reduction depends on if you have Essence Burst or if you don't. So this means that the cooldown on Fire Breath and Eternity Surge is going to always be exactly the same, right? If you're using this talent, you're using Pyre. But ultimately, this one is still pretty good. Although this talent only affects AoE, it's still a fantastic talent, right? For any situation where you're doing AoE. This one is not good. So Causality has been redesigned while channeling Disintegrate, Fire Breath, and Eternity Surge recharge faster. Once again, same issue, right? Where they're coming off cooldown at exactly the same time now. So whichever order you use Fire Breath and Eternity Surge in on the pull is going to be the order that they stay in for the rest of the fight, which means you can kind of think of them as just like one big homogeneous button. But that's not even the issue. The issue here is that this is while channeling Disintegrate, which means that if you have less haste and if you don't have Natural Convergence, the talent that makes it so your Disintegrate channels faster, you actually get more cooldown reduction than if you do have this stuff. So this actually like makes it scale negatively with haste. This talent specifically is going to scale negatively with haste. We'll still obviously get bonuses from haste in other ways, right? So you're not going to be like clicking off your lust buff or anything like that. But it does mean that we basically lose a lot of the scaling we have with haste, because all of the benefit from this talent is being scaled down the more haste you have. The shorter your Disintegrate is, the less cooldown reduction you get. However, the more haste you have in general, the more cast you get, right? So that's kind of like the counteract, but still, it has this weird negative synergy. It would be really easy to fix this just by making it go off of the ticks of Disintegrate, as opposed to making it go off of the duration. But anyways, moving on. So we have Dragon Rage duration is increased. They increased it by 4 seconds. You'll see why in just a bit. And then Animosity duration has been decreased. There's no ability anymore at all for you to get an extension on your Dragon Rage, right? And this is also just a straight up nerf, because you're always going to get at least 4 extensions in Dragon Rage. That's true on live. On a freshly boosted character with no haste buffs whatsoever, you're always going to get 4 extensions if you play correctly. It's not a bare minimum of 4 anymore. It's just like you always get 4, right? So like right now you could get 5 and 6 potentially, right? Unless you're AoE, obviously. In AoE it's a little different, but in Single Target you're only going to get 4. And then so 4 is going to be 18 plus 4 times 4, which is going to end up being 34 seconds, right? Which is 4 seconds less than what the current minimum duration is of 38 seconds. Obviously there's other implications for this as well. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, so I mean, of all the talents, I think that this is the one that's probably the one I take issue with the most. But anyways, they also nerfed Engulfing Blaze. That's the talent that makes it so your Living Flame takes a little bit longer to cast. Instead of being 0.5 seconds, it's now 0.3, and instead of being 40% damage, it's now 25% damage. And then also Imminent Destruction is completely redesigned, so we're getting onto the AoE changes here. Deep Breath makes it so your Empower spells go way quicker, right? You empower them 40% faster, and your enemies struck take 20% more damage. This is a debuff that is applied by the Deep Breath. So it makes Deep Breath gameplay kind of fun, because it means that you just like giga amp up your empowers. The issue with this is that you have to lead with Deep Breath, and the whole point of Deep Breath is that it works with Tyranny, so you want to use it kind of towards the end of the pack, which is kind of at odds with, the whole mastery thing. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, it's a pretty cool talent. We may even end up using this in Single Target, honestly, because the capstone area with these changes has basically like no Single Target talents anymore, and no competition for Single Target. So this might actually be a Single Target talent. So I hope you like using Deep Breath and Single Target, because that could be the case. Okay, and we also have this talent here, Raging Inferno. This one I really like, actually. This is probably the best change. So it makes your Firestorm absolutely massive, and it makes it so that Pyre deals more damage while enemies are in your Firestorm. So because Firestorm lasts 12 seconds, and because the cooldown is 20 seconds, that's basically only 8 seconds that you have that you're just kind of like buying time for the next Firestorm, which means you can just build and build and build Charge Blast stacks. You can build your Essence Burst, right? You can let your Essence regenerate, and basically just never use Pyre at all outside the Firestorm, and then place another Firestorm, and then use all of your Pyres, basically. If you just do it like a builder spender kind of playstyle where you only spend during your Firestorm, you're just going to deal a flat 25% more damage on Pyre. Another thing about this talent too that you should think about is it also buffs the Pyres from your Dragon Rage, which are already being buffed by Charge Blast as well to deal, you know, double damage, and there's also 3 of them, plus they're getting full mastery scaling. This is kind of the issue with Evoker right now, is that you just pull threat with these, right? And now you're going to just deal 25% more threat. In my test, it looks like my AoE capabilities in like a 1-minute timer are increased by around 40 to 60% with these changes. You know, Imminent Destruction and Raging Inferno. So this is kind of a big buff to AoE, like a really big one. And we don't have any threat considerations, right? If you think Evoker threat is bad now, just wait till you see it in the patch. It's going to be just completely out of control. They really have to do something about the Evoker threat. Now that they're buffing AoE by so much, I mean, we're kind of just like a big AoE pumper. We don't really do single target anymore, right? We're losing our staff in the patch. They're also considerably nerfing single target with all of these changes above. And obviously having, you know, clipping be removed and having less Dragon Rage duration means we're worse in execute. So, I mean, we're kind of just like a Windwalker, right? Where like our one trick is just doing AoE. But unfortunately, we don't have any way to mitigate the threat from it. So if you just go ham with AoE, you're going to pull threat and die, right? So as I'm making this video, we now have some actual data to show you to give you an idea of what this change actually looks like. So it looks like PI is still going to be pretty good for us. It's still a 7% increase. Like I was saying before, you know, haste obviously has other benefits. It used to be a 10% increase, so it's definitely less of an increase now. Like we scale less with haste, so all of that was true. And our damage is actually going down by a pretty considerable bit. So we're losing staff, like I mentioned before. We're also having all of these changes, which are in effect, they're nerfs to single target. It looks like the total amount of DPS loss is around 9.4%. And it looks like clipping is still actually a DPS gain, according to Sims right now. So do with that what you will. Anyways, I'm just gonna go ahead and move on to the VOD where I kind of give my take on how I feel about this stuff. Now that we've talked about the you know, the cold hard facts, now I'm gonna give you the opinion section. So they basically took the single target rotation and they took away everything that was interesting about it, right? Or that had some sort of expression of your skill as an evoker, right? All of that is out the window. There's no longer any sort of thought process or decision making about how you're using your powers. You just slam them both on cooldown. There's no variance in the two, right? Because they've split them. Used to be Feed the Flames was for Fire Breath and Causality was for Eternity Surge. But now, because Feed the Flames is for Pyre and Causality is for Disintegrate, no matter what you do, no matter what the situation is, you will always have the exact same cooldown on Fire Breath and Eternity Surge. The only thing that ever changes with those two spells is which order you press them in, okay? And once you press them in that one order, that will continue to be the order for the entire rest of the fight, unless you just stop dealing damage, okay? So if you press Fire Breath and Eternity Surge for the entire rest of the fight, your Fire Breath is always going to come off cooldown with Eternity Surge coming off cooldown at pretty much the same time. And you're always going to press those buttons in the exact same order, and there's no thought process. You could literally just consider them as one button. And then you don't have any sort of concerns about trying to chase a Dragon Rage duration, right? Because they nerf Animosity to the point where you can't get that extension, right? So because you're not chasing Dragon Rage anymore, that the aspect of the of like cooldowns trying to like get more Dragon Rage, it's just not going to happen, okay? You just always have the same amount of Dragon Rage uptime. Also, this means you have less uptime overall. Even though they've extended how much Dragon Rage is by 4 seconds, this is not enough to compensate for the change. You always get at least 4 extensions of Dragon Rage, regardless of how bad your character is. This is still going to be true. And you end up with 34 seconds as opposed to before, 38 seconds was the bare minimum, okay? So no matter how you slice it, you're getting less Dragon Rage uptime, okay? Dragon Rage is nerfed. There's no doubt about it. This means our mastery is also nerfed, okay? The role that we have in the raid is we're a big AoE pumper who does pretty good single target damage, right? And does pretty good 2-target cleave. and we also do really good prio damage. Okay, that's like our role as an evoker. The con that comes with that role is that we have giant killer, which basically makes it so that we deal less damage and execute. Everyone else does more damage and execute, right? Now, this was counteracted by the fact that animosity allowed us to chain our dragon rages and get more dragon rage uptime, right? But that's going away. We are becoming more of a liability because of this, and we have less execute damage. Also, because this talent causality deals with disintegrate channeling as opposed to the amount of ticks, right? It means that any sort of talent that increases how quickly disintegrate deals its damage actually is a detriment to this talent, right? So stuff like natural convergence or just having haste, lust, PI, all that shit, it's going to make it so that you get less cooldown reduction out of your disintegrate. In the grand scheme of things, you're still going to get those 4 extensions always, right? So it's not like a huge deal, but it does mean that we don't really scale with haste anymore, right? So remember, I said we don't really scale with mastery as well anymore, right? Because we get less dragon rage uptime. Now we're also scaling worse with haste. And on top of that, we have less dragon rage uptime. And on top of that, we just have less single target damage. Oh, and did I mention we're losing our staff too? So we're also losing around 4% of our damage from our staff. So you put these all together and you should be starting to see a picture in your head of an evoker that plays very boring, right? It has less actions per minute than any other class. Already that was true before this change. Now it's becoming way more true. Regardless of if Dragon Rage is up or if it's not up, the game is played the same way. This kills the distinction between being in your cooldowns and out of your cooldowns, and basically creates a situation where you don't feel it, right? Like it doesn't feel like you're in your cooldowns whenever you're there. So basically it's like your single target's giga nerfed and it doesn't feel like you're actually doing anything in your cooldowns, and you scale worse with every stat. Yeah, so I'm not trying to like doom and gloom on this. I will say there, this is the first, okay, here's a palette cleanser. This is the first round of changes, okay? We don't know what they're going to do from here. We're going to give our feedback. They're going to make changes based on our feedback. I'm sure that this is not what we're getting in the end, okay? Here's what I don't get, though. Here's what I don't get. How is it that my Empower is still bugged and my Disintegrates are still bugged, and they're still not talking about that? How is it possible that all of the dead keystones are exactly the way that they were? They're unchanged. Why are they fixing the things, or like quote unquote fixing? Why are they fixing the things that aren't broken and they're leaving the broken things broken? I don't get it. It's like the opposite of what I feel like it should be, right? Like buff the things that are bad, fix the things that are broken, instead of breaking the things that are fixed. But I guess being broken or fixed is a matter of opinion, right? You could say that clipping is broken, right? You could make that argument, but still, there's other things that are broken too. Fix those things. Empowerments. Disintegrate. Fix deep breath not going off whenever I press the button and it just doesn't do anything. Fix the fact that our keystones are bad, right? Yeah, they're messing with the good talents and they're leaving all the talents that we don't use just to languish. I mean, I would be okay with like moving away from the clipping playstyle if there was like some other thing about the evoker rotation that was even remotely complex when it comes to single target specifically, okay? So like the 3 areas where there was complexity in the evoker single target rotation, which is clipping, which is Dragon Rage extension chasing, which is empowerment, CD offsets, okay? Those 3 areas all are completely gone now. So if you're gonna do that, you need to like give us something else. There's no meat anymore. It's just filler. And our cooldown doesn't feel like it's actually a cooldown anymore because you just play the same way that you play outside your cooldown, right? There's no difference in your playstyle. The magic is chasing Dragon Rage extensions. The magic is having a different playstyle in your cooldowns versus not in your cooldowns. And the magic is having to actually think and use your brain while you're pressing your buttons instead of it having the same exact rotation in the same order every single time, regardless of if you're in cooldowns or if you're not in cooldowns. You're always pressing the same buttons in the same order. The best design for a class, in my opinion, I think a lot of people probably agree with this, is something that is easy to pick up and is hard to master. Devastation Evoker previously, regardless of if you like clipping or not, it was true the Devastation was easy to pick up and hard to master. With these changes, it is just very easy to pick up and extremely easy to master. I don't think there's any other class that comes close to how easy Evoker is going to be with these changes. So give it some time. Give Blizzard time to fix this. But I challenge anyone who is happy about this change to go log into the PTR and actually play the class. And then come back to me and tell me how you feel. Tell me how you feel about it. AoE changes are good though. The AoE changes are very good. All right, and that's going to be it for today. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe to my channel and ring that notification bell. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.